Plan fix it up, yeah, discuss plans, let's just fix it up, yeah. We got a ramp that we can install, but we need to go.
So we need a motion and vote to correct that.
Yeah, I would approve it.
Oh, motion to correct the minutes.
It's the point out on Mr. Pike.
Yeah. Approve it, take that.
The second. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
This is the point of our meeting where we have our public forum. Anyone in the audience?
I'm sorry, did we actually approve the calendar? I move we approve the consent calendar with the corrections being made to the minutes of June 17th.
Second. All in favor? Sorry. Public forum, anybody in the audience who wishes to speak on any topic near and dear to their hearts that are over. Not, we will move on. I don't have anything new to add to the report I gave to the work session, so whatever is in the minutes from the work session is where it stands at this point. Staff report.
Yeah, quickly, I shared with, I'll just go over my town administrator report. We'll soon have a presentation from the Urbana Authority. Second, I provided an updated draft of the proposed lease with SCAN for your consideration. Third, let's see. And then the rest of the items are items that were discussed previously during the work session. E911 sign ordinance honorarium for the summer intern, and then discussion of Bowers donation. That would be it for now. The only additional other item is we currently have for the mold down and scan 2 quotes. And I'm looking at getting a 3rd quote this Thursday from Serpro. So I have 2 other local firms. So I'll probably just share them all 3 with you guys. It's an unexpected expense, and then it's more with that flash storm we had Saturday while I was out of town. We had some water that was leaking down by the elevator entrance, so past that fire escape when you come up the elevator. It's not there this morning, but I'll try to think and any advice on anybody who might be the right person to take a look at it. But in the meantime, I'm gonna look at it with Jan tomorrow once he's back on that one schedule with us. But just another unexpected expense, but I'll give you guys a heads up and keep you looped in, kind of like the mold of the vehicle. And then additionally, we shared with council the May 2024 financial statement, but our printer broke today, and our nicer one that can do the long form. So printing on NP511 will be kind of a fortress to you guys rather than happy with. So I can share a paper copy once if they're able to. If not, you have it online with PDF to kind of sort through it. Printers on a lease, so you at least get a good back and forth customer service, but they have to order a part. So there's an advantage to that, right? And like something outright for us. That would be it for the moment. Thank you, Council.
Yeah, questions?
Javier, it may behoove us to get like some of these big basement waterproofing contractors in here just to look at downstairs overall and sort of point out some of the deficiencies that they may be able to see that might be obvious.
Yes, I can search around, and if you have any recommendations, please.
I can talk to Alpine. We used to have water in our basements. So we have few people show up.
I might ask you some advice.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Other questions for the town administrator? Clerk, do you have any report? Percent, side of the RV.
You know it. I was not at the last meeting, unfortunately, but the only thing that I know going on is finishing up inventory. I'm very busy this time of year, and Mr. Parker is a traditional user of phones and has been playing tag with me a little bit, but we can figure it out and get it done.
Very well. Let's go. Any comments?
Mr. Mayor, just to reiterate what I mentioned in the work session, that we, as a planning commission, have kept the chair and the vice chair in the same position, and also happy to have town councilor, former planning commissioner Josh Peck back on the commission, and the plan continues to be moved forward with a completion date here. The comprehensive plan.
It would be nice if we finish that thing up before the first of the year.
Absolutely.
Any questions for Mr. Briscoe?
Nothing really new since last week when we spoke, holiday happenings meeting coming up this week.
Yeah.
Plans and all.
Well, be that. The ball here is coming road. All right. Any other questions, those parties that are involved in holiday happenings are meeting Wednesday morning, so get started on everything. So, we'll go report on that meeting, next week's session. Oh, Mr. Tyson, you got anything else for us today?
Well, I can talk about Parks and Recreation, and a member talked about government service. I wasn't there, but the Parks and Rec Commission didn't meet in August, but we did get the minutes from our July meeting, and basically what we talked about was the expense and how to look at fixing the dock and fixing the roadway, which is going to be substantial. So we're going to eventually get some quotes on that and try to figure that out. Fix the dock and the road. We also discussed about we have a kiosk and maybe using that at the Canal Basin Square and highlighting the A. Raymond Thacker levee walk and the Birding and Wildlife Trail, and kind of have some information about the flooding before the levee was put in, because it's the most traveled path, and a lot of people don't know they're on a levee that protects the town and more about the history of the town. We're working with the museum to get some, maybe some pictures or some information about that, how we could do that. And that we're not sure where we put that exactly, but probably put it near those steps at the Basin Square. And the last thing we talked about, and spent most of the meeting talking about the trying to get the Canal Basin Square up to speed and back to where it was. There's a number of problems with that are there. Some of the damaged sidewalks, the water damage, and of course the hogsheads or the barrels need to be replaced. And we've already started. The plexiglass has been replaced, and there's coverage for that. And then some of the boats really either need to be repaired or replaced. So that's going to be expensive, but that's our major tourist attraction in town, one of them. And so we talked about how to get that back up. And we do have a donation. Maybe we can get more donations for Canal Basin Square. So that's what we talked about. And I wasn't at the Government Service Committee meeting, but Matthew has volunteered to report on what happened, the issues that they were dealing with. That was about 2 weeks ago.
It was a pretty short meeting. It was mostly driven by someone who spoke to Scotts about concerns. These concerns have been addressed before by government services council, so we kind of reiterated a few things. The first, and that there's only 4 things. The first one was about applications for the board and the commission, and we were asked to review that application. And the committee's recommendation is that the application just be simple, that there really isn't any requirement to be on the board or the commission. And so that just having, in a sense, a letter of intent, their address, contact information, whether or not they live in the town. But the discussion kind of spun a little bit off to the side. We understand that the architecture review board only has to be majority residents. So the question, and of course, we don't know the answer, so hopefully we'll ask staff this. The question is whether or not the planning board has that same flexibility or planning commission. Don't know the answer, but this was something that came up. And then, I'm jumping around here. It was also brought up that we understand that in the past, there's always been funding for people on the planning commission to be able to complete a state class. It used to be in person, and because of COVID, it was online. Now you can do it both ways. And the question was, one, does ARB have something like that also that could help the board members, people educated in it? And the requirement for the planning commission is not a requirement, it's a recommendation. So the question was, how many people on that actually have that, and are they planning on taking it, and are they aware they can take it, and is there funding in the budget for it? So these are just questions that came up, and we don't know the answers, so we're just sharing them. And then we wound up, one of the questions that was posed by whoever the person was, and of course we invited them to come to his meeting and kind of voice their own opinions. But Scott didn't tell us who it was or whether or not they'd be interested in coming. So, but one of the other questions was about confusion and budgeting and how things are reported, and the reports they felt weren't clear where things went. One of the examples is an old example, and it's been straightened out, but like when the maintenance truck used to be in the police department, all vehicles are over there, and we've broken it out to clarify that. So a lot of some of these questions are really things we've already dealt with, but I guess the public is questioning that, so we're just bringing it to your attention. It's still out there. And then the recommendation from the committee was once again that things like we have a maintenance department, but we don't have a maintenance department in our budget. We have a sidewalk department, we have other things that add up to it, but we don't have it broken out in maintenance. And the recommendation was to get your budget to reflect what actually is, so you can find out what things are. I know we've heard it before, but that was what came up in the discussion. And then the other recommendation was that any kind of grants or donations be broken out, so they're in the department. So the example that was kicked out is, of course, Canal Street and $5,000. That it should be in the Parks and Rec as $5,000 for Canal Street, and thus, if the bill for the water fountain is coming out of the grant, it should come out to show that it comes out of that area, so that you know how much more is left, so the person who made the donation can be satisfied that it was used for what it was. So keeping the grant separate was recommended to do that. And then we talked again, the questions about maintenance. Whoever the individual was questioning if some of the maintenance was being done. So we discussed maintenance again. The only main question that the committee had for council or staff is with the canal basin part, with the rocks and everything. It's very difficult to weed whack and weed. And even though we're not allowed to use Roundup, I know there's natural products. And again, it's a question. If you don't know the answer, that's why I'm bringing it to you. The question was, can we use that kind of stuff in Sylvan Pollinator City? And would that be something the town would be interested in getting involved in? And then the last thing that was brought up was about volunteers. And the question that came up with volunteers, and volunteers are different than appointments and elected officials. We have volunteers that come in and out and do all sorts of stuff. And it was strongly recommended by the community that we have some kind of hold harmless form, so that if a volunteer gets hurt, they're not suing the town. If the volunteer damages personal property in the name of the town, we're not getting in trouble for that. And also the other thing was whether or not someone does work, and we would expect to get paid months later. So the example is like if we try to get a tractor to be able to do grading, we're going to have someone 2 months later saying, we spent 2 weeks grading if you increase the percent. And the only recommendation we had on that was, of course, you'd want to get the attorney involved, and it's not something we would create, but I would imagine, and the question is, for staff, is whether or not the insurance company that we work with would have a form that would make sense, and it's already there, we just aren't using it. So that's all that came out of the committee for that. And we did not have the minutes done. Scott's had a rough draft, but he didn't get any updates done because he was leaving the country. Right? Is it the country? Yeah. Yeah.
We're going safari.
There you go, but he'll be back in 2 weeks and then we'll have it. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I reached out to Scott, I think some of it is information, some of the stuff that we started to address between council and staff, and then I want to get some details on some aspects and see if it's work that out, so we can move on forward, but he sent me an email and said you're talking with the staff. So I'll report out a little bit to government service and keep council in the loop. Not very exact, but
I think that whole farmers point is very well made. And, it applies to serve, it applies to anybody. We should start requiring that, come up with a draft, maybe governments. Oh, harmless,
Oh, yeah. Good idea.
right?
Yeah.
I think that should be standard
Yeah.
issue when people volunteer with the town, just to protect the town. And the other thing that struck me, which I think is quite well made, is and Javier, you said we would go into budget discussions much earlier for next fiscal year. I think it would be good for us to look at reorganizing sort of the spend categories to more align with, you know, town priorities and just the groups that we have, so we can really track things more closely. So that might be a side exercise that's really worth doing. I know Melody has done some things for the grants and whatnot, but since I think it would be good to take a strategic view.
I think we've begun this year with
Yeah,
with maintenance and with the farmers market and with grants, but there's more work to do. And then I think government service had a good point in other organizations. Your insurance company I used the insurance company to get information on HR policies, so they have to have something for something boilerplate for whole harmless that we could share with the attorney and bring back to us.
because I'd like to see a real distinction between operational spend and capital improvements. We can talk about that. We have a little bit differing opinion on what capital improvements look like, but and you know, sort of as Matthew pointed out, tracking capital improvements or whatever it is to the area of, you know, the functional area that they tie to, I think would be good. And maybe government services could look at maybe making a recommendation on some categories, like a hierarchy of how we might start to regroup some of the spend categories, and we can bring it for
So
discussion.
we're not combined down.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen that before.
Yeah, so we can talk about it in a work session together to see if that makes sense.
And that whole time, so I think we talked about that briefly with the parks and all too, because if we have volunteers like Jack is out for a day, for example,
Yeah,
now if he got injured, you know, if he doesn't, we don't volunteer for him, or somebody's out there cleaning trails or something, you know, we're unreliable, you know, so that would be good, but.
and
But
that's
you're talking about categories for
budget.
for the budget that breaking things down a little bit more itemized.
Well, and aligning things where they should be put
Right.
appropriately, right? So we're not searching through all these pages. You could collapse it down to 6 or 7 categories and say, okay, this is what this category spend is, and this, rather than have maintenance and sort of one bucket over here and one bucket over here, we kind of drag them all together so you can
That-
get a better
Yes,
picture.
I think the town truck was with the police truck or something like that, I heard, but,
No,
That may have been the house.
that's,
Yeah.
so that's what you're.
But I think it bears looking
Vehicles
at.
are, it's not a category.
it's between departments.
Okay.
And then how we track grants, I don't know, do we want like one category for grants, or you want to map the grants into the individual functional areas, like if it's an EPC grant, should it belong under EPC line item, should we just track all the grants?
Donations.
Sort of separately, donations as well,
That's,
I don't know the
And
best way.
the other thing we talked about is the carryover, like we didn't spend $10,000 on the parks last year, so. You know, we got 10,000 this year, but maybe we should have extra from last year, put in with the 10,000 there, so. It's just been that this year.
Particularly if you look at government spending, I believe it's sort of user rules kind of thing.
Yeah, that'd be good to
I
know,
know it is at the federal level, we should have to work through that before.
and that would be good to know.
There's a push at the end of the fiscal
Yeah.
year to spend money,
I know, we didn't do that,
and if you don't spend it,
it goes in the general fund.
well, it goes back, but they look more closely at your budgeting next year because, and your budget may get cut, because like you asked for more than you actually could spend in the fiscal year. And so you sort of get a little bit of penalty for doing.
That would.
Any other comments on that subject? Ms. Morris? She prepared.
Just a few brief things, the ops plan or all hazards plan is due soon. I don't think we have a specific ETA on that within the next few months. It is, as you recall, needs to be updated every 5 years. This is the year like the comp plan that needs to be updated. EPC will review that per our original agreement. The volunteer, Scottsville Volunteer Fire Department is actually taking the lead on it. So we're looking forward to getting that soon. E911 direction from council, that's a separate line item on the agenda, so I won't say much about that. And then summer schedule for us ends this month. We've been meeting once a month instead of every other week. That will, our normal schedule will resume in September, and we do have a meeting this week.
Questions for emergency preparedness?
And I have an update from today, so I'll meet with the fire chiefs in 2 weeks, go over some details, keep moving forward.
Please remind them to bring it back to EPC.
So we'll bring a more concrete draft. After we get it.
Mr. Payne, you have anything to report on tonight?
Police chief Jenkins has been out of town, so we haven't had a weekly get together. I have had an occasion to have conversations with the other two officers. Still continue to hear good things, good support for our police officers in Scottsville, so we're proud of that. As you all remember from the last work session, we had some incidents come up. I won't elaborate on those, but a little different than you can see around Scottsville. So I'm sure the chief is here to tell everyone to protect your property, you know, be aware of the surroundings, and protect yourself and your family, because the world's getting smaller.
You understand the chief is biding his time in the Charlotte airport.
With frozen salmon.
Probably so.
So
He said he caught some, so.
good.
Our chief has just spent his first week ever in Alaska, so. he's supposed to be back tomorrow. He wouldn't be airline. So, anybody have any questions about anything else before we move on?
I just have a question for you. Can we get an update on the one incident in the field? Just offline,
About the field, you need to ask the field,
the one that occurred.
in the field, right? That was, we were,
Because the officer who came didn't have an update, you know, what happened once it sort of left, but.
like, that was a mutual aid call.
Right.
I think he was the first one on scene out in County handled it. Therefore, down in County, but, you know, we'll release that information out to that.
Yeah, I think they can follow up,
So that was a little different.
yeah,
So
exactly.
I'll have two things about reporting back to us for you happens there.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna turn it back over to the town administrator to introduce our guests this evening.
Yes, if Austin could first introduce himself.
I'm Austin Mars, senior civil engineer with the Ravenna Water and Sewer Authority.
And then, yeah, go ahead,
Have you taken up?
whoever's going to go first. And I have the slides up on the projector.
Great, thank you very much. Love to get this up.
Thank you for having us tonight. My name is Jennifer Whitaker. I'm the Director of Engineering and Maintenance at the Ravenna Water and Sewer Authority. I think I've met a few of you in the past at several events. I think we had ribbon cutting at the water treatment plant a few years back. Thank you again for having us. We wanted to, Austin was here a few weeks ago with the staff from the Albemarle County Service Authority, and we wanted to we had talked to Javier a little bit about, give you a little bit of background about who we are and how we fit into the matrix of water service in Albemarle County. So with that, skip over to the next page, please, Austin. So the Ravenna Water and Sewer Authority is a agency that was created in 1972, and it's a joint action of Charlottesville City Council and Albemarle County Board of Supervisors. It's interesting, there was some money available for the Clean Water Act to build wastewater infrastructure at the time, and both the county and the city applied for that funding to build a wastewater plant at the exact same site. And at the time, the EPA said, why don't you guys get together and form this organization that can do this wholesale wastewater and water treatment work. And that's how Ravenna came to be. So we provide wholesale drinking water and wastewater services to both the city and the county. Not well systems, but anywhere there's an organized public water system, that's generally work that we do. We have 104 employees and an annual operating budget of about $55 million. And we have a 5-year capital improvement program of about $371 million. So it's a pretty heavy. In fact, if you switch to the next slide, thank you, Austin. About 50% of our budget is operations, and the other 50% is debt service on those capital improvements. So we like to say that we're the capital arm of both the county and the city. And so we take on the debt, we pay mortgage, so to speak, and that way it is not on the books for either the county or the city, and we're able to really focus on capital construction. Our board is made up of members from both the city and the county, including 2 elected officials, Brian Kingston from Charlottesville City Council, and Ann Malik, who is the Board of Supervisors member from Albemarle County. We also have the city manager, Sam Sanders, the county manager, Jeff Richardson, as well as the director of utilities for the city of Charlottesville, Hildebrand, and the executive director for Albemarle County Service Authority, Quinn Lunsford. We also have 1 member appointed by both parties, by the city and the county, and they take turns appointing every 2 years. And Mr. Mike Gaffney is our current chairman, and he gets reappointed every 2 years. He's been here for 20 years. So every other year, the county and the city agree on something, and they reappoint him. So it's been a nice steady leadership role for the authority. Again, just as an explanation, we are the wholesaler, which means we do the dams, the reservoirs, the water treatment plants, the wastewater plants, and the connecting infrastructure. The water that comes to you, to your home or down the street, is provided to you either if you live in the city of Charlottesville, the city utilities, or if you live in town here, through the Albemarle County Service Authority. So really, we're a background support agency for the Albemarle County Service Authority. And in turn, we have 5 water supply reservoirs. For those of you who are outdoor enthusiasts, you may have visited several of these. We have Beaver Creek out in Crozet. In the urban system, we have the South Fork Ravenna Reservoir, which if you're on 29 and you just pass Walmart and you look to the left, you'll see a dam and water flowing there. That's the South Fork Ravenna Reservoir. Sugar Hollow is up against Shenandoah National Park. Ragged Mountain Reservoir is the dam we just built a few years ago, just to the west of town. And then here in town, west of the city, here in town, we have the Toadier Creek Reservoir and the water supply system. We have 6 water treatment plants, again, 3 urban plants. One's at South Ravenna, adjacent to the reservoir that's just behind Walmart. The Observatory Hill water treatment plant is up at the university, up on O Hill, basically behind the stadium. We have a small plant, north of town on the North Ravenna River that we're going to be decommissioning here in the next several years. We have a Scottsville water treatment plant here, just, down James River Road. We also have a very small wellhead treatment plant at Red Hill Elementary School that was in response to a fuel spill several years, probably decades ago at this point. But it was to provide water to the elementary school as well as the neighborhood and communities surrounding it. And then in Crozet, we also have a water treatment there. And last but not least, before I turn it over to Austin, we have 4 wastewater plants. We have one sort of mega plant, if you will, it's 80 acres, right at the southern boundary of the city of Charlottesville. It's in Hogwaller. If you've been around Charlottesville long enough, that will sound familiar to you. But if you haven't, it's at the very southern end near the newly restored woolen mills, right at the city-county boundary. We treat 15 million gallons of wastewater there a day, and we provide wastewater treatment for the entire urban community. We also have the Scottsville wastewater treatment plant here. We have a small plant in Glenmore for the Glenmore subdivision, and then we also run the Stone Robinson Elementary School when the students are in session. So with that, I thank you very much, and I'll let Austin come on over and give you a little bit of information about the infrastructure here specifically in Scottsville. Thank you.
All right, so just kind of highlighting our water facilities here in the town of Scottsville, kind of starting at the bottom of the page over here, we do own and operate the Toyota Creek Reservoir, along with a raw water intake pump station at that site. I should also mention, so I'll cover over on the left-hand side of the page, you got the Scottsville water treatment plant, and we do have another raw water intake supply behind that treatment plant on the Toyota Creek itself. The treatment plant is capable of 250,000 gallons per day, and has an average daily demand of about 50,000 gallons per day right now. Moving up James River Road, kind of towards the top of the screen, just below the arrow there, we own and operate the finished water pump station, as well as what we call the Scottsville standpipe tank. From there, the finished water pump station pumps finished water into the town via transmission main to the 795 tank, and that's kind of going off the screen, kind of following that gold colored arrow we have there. In total, we own and operate about 4 miles of transmission piping between the raw water piping that pipes the reservoir water up, or the water from the creek up to the treatment plant, and then another 2.75 miles the pipe to get the water out and up to the 795 tank. Would also mention that the service story owns and operates almost 5 miles of piping here in town that helps get the water to your doorstep. A good bit of that piping and some of our piping as well being replaced in the phase 4 project that John and Chuck presented on the last time. We'll also mention too that last year the service story granted us ownership of the 795 tank finished water pump station. This was more or less just to kind of bring the town more or less into the same operational strategy as we would operate in the urban system of Crozet, where we operate kind of the larger transmission infrastructure and kind of keep the service story operating the distribution infrastructure that gets water into your house. The next slide. So here's just some drone shots that we got of our facilities with the in-house drone. Kind of starting top left, that's the standpipe tank and finished water pump station along James River Road there. Top right, that's the 795 tank on the north end of town. Going to the bottom left, that's our Scottsville water treatment plant along James River Road. And the bottom right, that's the Toyota Creek Reservoir along with raw water intake and pump station. Kind of transition over to the wastewater facilities now. Kind of down off the end of Page Street, we own and operate the Scottsville Water Resource Recovery Facility, or in terms of presentation, the wastewater treatment plant. That has a capacity of 200,000 gallons per day and has a current kind of average daily demand or daily flow of about 66,000 gallons per day. We also own and operate the wastewater pump station over across the ball fields there, kind of over near Valley Street, and we own and operate the force main that basically pumps the wastewater up from the pump station up to the treatment plant for treatment. Would also mention that upstream of the wastewater pump station, all the sanitary sewer piping that gets the water or the wastewater to the pump station, that's all owned and operated by the service authority as well, and that's about 5.2 miles. So a few of the capital improvement project studies that we have that completed, that are going on now, and then upcoming, first we'll mention the granular activated carbon, or as we always say, GAC. GAC treatment here at the water treatment plant on James River Road. This helps remove total organic carbons from the water, from the drinking water. It actually matches the 250,000 gallon a day capacity of the treatment plant. This is actually currently our only plant that we have full GAC basically at. We're working to get all the other urban area prostate plants to that same standard. Scottsville is the only plant that has full GAC capacity. That's pretty cool. This was completed in April of 2018 at a cost of $1.615 billion. Some other water treatment plant process improvements we completed. Our backwash waste lagoon liner replacement that was completed in 2022 at a cost of $315,000. We added ultraviolet disinfection to the process stream at the water plant. Completed that in 2021 at a cost of $160,000. And we also replaced the finished water flow meter and did some process piping improvement in the basement of the filter building at the treatment plant back in 2020 at a cost of $145,000. We do have a much larger upgrade coming of the water plant. This will replace a lot of the 1960s vintage equipment at the treatment plant. We'll be doing significant work on the raw water pumping side. We'll be doing wholesale electrical system upgrades at the treatment plant. We'll be expanding and adding new chemical storage areas to keep that in compliance. We'll be adding additional laboratory spaces and kind of bringing those in and make them more modern. We'll also be making kind of smaller process related improvements kind of through that process. So design for that will kick off in 2027. Construction will begin in 2029, and that'll be an $11 million project. On the wastewater side of things, we're going to be replacing the existing generator down there at the wastewater pump station. So that generator right now only provides emergency backup power to the wastewater pump station. So there was an extended power outage, we'd be able to get basically the wastewater to the treatment plant, but would not be able to treat it. So what this will do, we'll be able to, it'll actually provide emergency backup power to the entire wastewater complex down there. In the event of a storm, we'll be able to kind of continue our treatment. So the design's actually complete on this. We're waiting some grant funding determination for that in order to kind of get that construction. That's about $520,000. Some additional projects that we're working on, and apologize, this is some small font. We are working on a needs assessment of our wastewater plant. We've recently gotten some new DEQ permit language, so we're evaluating that. And part of that process will be to kind of kind of confirm what additional improvements might need to be in the wastewater plant in the next several years. So that's at a cost of $30,000, and that study's ongoing. We're also going to be working on rehabilitation of the lagoon outfall, which basically brings wastewater into the treatment plant, or helps bring wastewater into the treatment plant. That would be at a cost of $300,000, and that'll kind of rehabilitate the existing 1980s vintage concrete structure there. So it'll be concrete rehabilitation, valve replacement, that sort of thing. So that's actually this picture on the screen there. And then the last thing I'll mention too, we will be replacing the polymer feed system, which is one of the chemicals used at the treatment plant. That system is outlived its useful life, so we'll be replacing that system starting in 2027. And also adding some additional chemical storage in as well. That'll be the cost of $300,000. And with that, I believe we'll open up to questions.
So the very last thing you said, can you repeat that? What's getting replaced in 2027? You said it's outlived.
The polymer feed system at the wastewater plant. So it's one of the chemicals we use to treat the wastewater. So that plant's existing to the, I think it was late 80s, early 90s. So it's about 40 years old and need replacement. So it's just a maintenance replacement.
Could you,
No, go right.
could you elaborate on the generator a little bit? We've gone through this very quickly.
Yeah, sorry about that.
That's okay. There's currently no generator there?
There is, so the existing generator is about 30 years old and only provides backup power to the wastewater pump station. So you could pump the wastewater up to the treatment plant, but you can't treat it. The treatment plant will be out of service. So this project will be to upsize and replace the generator with a large enough generator to provide power to not only the pump station, but also the treatment.
Have there been any issues?
Not that I'm aware of, because most of the time the power has come back on in enough time where it hasn't been a problem. But to my knowledge, there haven't been any issues.
So if I could, thank you. So what happens right now is the everything comes to the wastewater pump station. The wastewater pump station has the backup generator, which then can bring flow into the plant. And there's a diversion box. And it either diverts flow into the lagoon where it's stored, or it diverts it into the plant where it's treated. And what happens when the power goes out is we do a full diversion to the lagoon, store, and then when power comes back on, we're able to then begin treating the wastewater back from the lagoon. And what we would like to do is be able to continue full treatment. It'll give us more storage capacity in the lagoon. It'll provide better redundancy for the whole facility. So that's how it currently operates and how we would like it to operate going forward.
Is there a limit in the number of days where we have water stored on the event?
So this is on the wastewater side.
Yeah.
On the water side, we have full backup power
Okay,
generation. Yes, ma'am.
It's just wastewater.
Just on the wastewater, yes, ma'am.
So the treated water, broken out, and it's, is it then reused as drinking water? Or
No, it goes into the January.
so this is the chamber, which is.
Remember several years ago, the lagoon, was dredged. How often does that get done?
That I can't answer.
I believe that was the first time it had been done, maybe shortly after construction. We had a contractor doing some work at several of our facilities, and you don't typically say that somebody's super efficient and cost effective. That doesn't happen very often these days. But at the time, we had a great contractor who was doing really fantastic work, and we're like, we've got a facility for you. Let's go down and take a look. And so that dredging project did give us a fair amount of capacity and restored it to its original condition.
And the other question is, with those thousands of apartments that are going up on 29 north out the rural, is there, you anticipate you have enough pumping capability, or are you gonna have to consider another pumping station?
I can answer that one. So we've got a community water supply plan for the urban area. We've been studying this extensively. There's an entire capital improvement program. In fact, I'd say over half to almost 2/3 of that $371 million is devoted to ensuring that we can serve that additional demand. So we're extremely aware of it, and it's coming quickly. So we do have a plan, and we're actually starting to carry projects out to bid, right, to kind of, reinforce, that plan if it happens.
In fact, there's a pump station being constructed right now. It's just about done, just off of Airport Road, right? There's a very large cell tower there. Right at the base of that cell tower is a new pump station that we've built that will help fortify the entire north end of it.
I've noticed over through that, where all those new apartments going in at 53 and 618, the big churches, or big, with a big blue tank, and
There you're going quickly.
anybody have any other questions?
How much can the impact hold? I mean, is it 30%? I mean, how full is it now? I mean.
You're the Scottsville plant.
Yeah.
So on the water side, so the treatment capacity is about 250,000 gallons a day, so 250,000 gallons a day. Right now, the demand in the town, on average, not max day, but on average, is about 50,000 gallons a day. So about 20% of the.
So we got plenty.
And I have, last question about, also paying attention about the world getting smaller. Some of the things we've talked about in emergency preparedness are failures or attacks on infrastructure. Do you have plans to change your sort of security environment in the future? Does that get revisited every so often?
It does get revisited every so often, but back in 2019, I don't know if some of you folks remember, Virginia Beach Department of Public Utilities had a horrific insider attack, and it killed many members of the utilities department down there. So that event kind of helped cause us to take a step back, and we actually are in the process of implementing a card access system at every single one of our facilities, including pump stations and everything. So only authorized personnel can get in those facilities, but most of our sites, even the water treatment plant, they're lock gate 24/7. We only, we're visiting them, frequently, but, we do, take security seriously and, continue to try to evolve and make sure we're considering, internal and external threats to our infrastructure.
Are they camera on?
We do have camera monitoring at a treatment plants, and I believe some of our remote facilities and pump stations do, but I know all of our treatment plants have camera monitoring.
I had a question for you, drinking water. What is the quality standards that you guys operate by as far as when it comes out of your treatment plant?
Sure. So we operate, I guess, from the regulatory side of things, through the Environmental Protection Agency, they issue all drinking water standards, so we comply with those and are trying to stay up with emergent contaminants and everything else. We also, operate in accordance with the American Water Works Association standards, but the primary regulatory standards are from the Environmental Protection Agency.
And if we ever have any emergencies or need to contact one of you guys, who's the best person to reach out to as far as questions or anything like that?
We have a call down list. It could be either.
It could be either of us. We also have a manned 24-hour a day operations number, which is probably in an emergency, that's the number that we should give you, but we also have several other people that we can give you the touch base with, no problem.
But we do have a whole team of operations and maintenance and engineering personnel that's geared up, prepared to handle line breaks and those sort of things on the.
We can send that information maybe to Javier.
Yeah,
Does that work? Okay, then we'll send all that to you.
Thank you.
Sure.
One more question, just kind of a follow-up to Alex's. When you say that it's EPA standards, I know that with differing, the EPA, with each election cycle, EPA, there's changes to the EPA also. When those changes occur, do you say they become less stringent? Do you continue following the most stringent EPA guidelines, even if they are lessened or?
So, I appreciate your question, because I think it's a good one, right? How much flexibility is there in regulations, and there's a lot of discussion nationally about particularly the EPA. So the Clean Water Act and the Safe Drinking Water Act were adopted in 1972 and 73. And they set sort of the rules for wastewater treatment and water treatment across the country. And there have been updates to them through Congress telling the EPA how to legislate water and wastewater services. That then gets translated down to Virginia through the Department of Health. And there's a set of regulations the Department of Health has as well. And they're fairly standard from state to state. They're not exactly the same, but they're fairly standard. And so those sort of the cutting edge things might change if I'm being honest. Some of those, how fast, for instance, if you've heard of microplastics or you've heard of some of these other sort of emerging contaminants, that's where you're going to see the difference from a political standpoint, but your general water quality standards are sort of set across the country, and they are what every water treatment plant in the country is required to do. And state of Virginia, again, isn't necessarily following the same political, election cycle. And so it also has a set of standards that it works to hold everybody in this Commonwealth to. So, I hope to lay your mind at rest that regardless of how the election goes, we will be producing very high quality drinking water. And as Austin mentioned before, Scottsville is the only plant that we have full 100% capability to use granular activated carbon. I think I recognize a couple faces from the ribbon cutting a few years ago. And what that does is it offers two items. One is it helps remove organic carbon from the water supply. So all fertilizers, think tannic, think just naturally occurring organics in your drinking water. So it helps remove some of that so that it doesn't react with chlorine and cause byproducts. The second thing it helps is if there is PFAS in the upstream water, if you've heard of that, it's the forever chemicals. It's quite frequently people use DuPont or Teflon as a descriptor, so we can kind of picture what it is. It's Gore-Tex coatings, it's things that makes things slick. right? It's a chemical that's been used in this country for a fair amount of time and only recently have we come to understand that it's everywhere. And so there's a new drinking water standard specific to PFAS. And that activated carbon allows us to remove those chemicals, catch them and remove them. And what's fantastic is, well, that's not even why we designed it and we built it several years ago. But it has become the best technology. And so we are very thankful across our whole system that we have it in place. We don't frequently have detections of PFAS in our drinking water, which is also fantastic. But that barrier is there within the water treatment plant should we need it. So.
Good to know.
Again, thank you for being with us, our good information. If you need, we will call
Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Yeah.
Advertise, we have clean water.
The best thing.
Well, it was amazing when it first went in. I remember like, yeah, a few years back when it first had it, it was a big thing about. And you can't waste it.
Perfect.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll see, yeah, we'll see.
All right, let's move on to scan. Javier, you wanna introduce us again and tell everybody what we stand?
Yeah, so in your packet, we have a revision based on some comments and input we received last week. So some of it was corrections to typos, and then essentially those red edits just made them black. But other than that, honestly, it was only the change to the dates. This draft is the same as the one that we talked about last Monday. If it pleases the council, it's a requirement, and I think it would be a new norm that, well, not new norm, new requirement we should adhere to, I'll put it that way. That prior to having a lease like this, it's a requirement for Virginia to have a public hearing. So before any forward action, depending on council's decision, that would be a prerequisite, I'll put it that way. But yeah, I don't have anything much more to report that I switched the months over.
Welcome to discuss what you want to discuss about this now, or maybe it's all next.
Yes, so he reviewed it, and changes last week that were presented during the work session were actually changes that Jim recommended and then we worked on together. So he's had his eyes on it.
So we have a public hearing coming up with content, didn't we? Can we include this in?
I think this is the one. Yeah.
I thought it was something else.
We're gonna get a chance in a minute, here, if your proposal for the sign ordinance does not require a public hearing, but if you'd like to have one, we can tag it on to this one, and that will go the next one. I said, think about that till we get to it, and we can make a decision. All right. Any questions then of Javier about the lease, and if not, let's not motion to.
One question, you talk about this, I don't know, you talk about the Stan's budget, and what their current budget is. I don't know if we've ever seen that, because I know they, to see what they're
I can tell you,
in.
We have the president here, so.
we have a $21,000 a year budget.
$21,000.
Yeah,
Okay.
and we
Well, that's
are,
pretty stable, pretty quick.
well, it stays pretty stable. Yes, it's stable. And we are able to, through grants and donations, able to raise about half to meet our budgets. And the other half has come out of an old donation, an angel donation. And that it will probably, if we stay there, right, we're looking at, well, at the time, for some reason, the number 18, I'm sure it's less than that now, maybe 15 months of not being broke, kind of thing, but we have a business plan in place to meet our budget, and so we're excited about that, but it's a $21,000 budget, and then when the rent goes up next year, it'll be 25,000. 25,000 is kind of where we use that number,
Are you doing fundraisers every year?
Pardon
Do
me?
you have a fundraiser every year? Or
We are,
was
we
it
have
just-
the Holiday Arts Market is our biggest fundraiser. Every event we tag fundraiser to it. We're looking next year on doing a founders gala that was done pre-COVID. And we're hoping to make that a more of a volunteer appreciation, invite other local not-for-profits to make this their opportunity to appreciate their volunteers. And we plan to sell tickets to that gala, you know, reasonably to make that possible. What are some of the other big events that we're hoping? Like I said, Symmetry Players has been a great contribution. The classes, they're limping along, but they keep getting better and better. People are interested. We have a wedding. We've rented Victory Hall for a wedding. Yay. You know, we've rented Victory Hall for private ballroom dancing lessons. And so, and of course, Charlottesville Ballet has been a wonderful partner for us. So we're just, and we're looking to make a hire. And this person will take on ops, be able to help us with, getting the word out there and, looking for grants. We're reapplying for the training grounds. The VOF is closed, but Luke has a new one. Dominion Energy has a grant. We're looking at a grant called Hometown, which is a placemaker grant for historic buildings. And bringing, you know, making it education, entertainment kind of thing. Our home, and it's like the woman wrote the paragraph about Scottsville when she was describing the brand, was like, this is Scottsville, you know, so we're excited about, and then I do work with you on that other brand, and that's a nice one. So, and we just found a new operations grant. There's a grant out there where you can take their money and they give you, I mean, it's, you know, several $1,000s to just do ops, you know, just, you know, pay the light bills. You don't see those kinds of things very often, but you know, you apply, you have to qualify, and you have to be our partner, and we're gonna talk about that. But when they'll pay your light bill, they'll pay your stuff like that, and you never, it's not much money, but it's something. So that's all on the business plan, and of course, we're hoping that soon we'll have a gallery downstairs, an arts gallery that'll be open like the museum. And people will be able to sell art and, the best idea I think we have is we're thinking about selling art supplies, like, and you know, there's almost nowhere except the Dollar General to get printer paper here. We're gonna attract everybody to our gallery because we sell office supplies and art supplies because they're hard to find in this town.
And the paper is like tissue.
I
I
know,
just
I
for the
know.
first time got stuck. I had to buy some.
I don't know who up there's
Computer
in charge
paper there.
You know, instead of CBD, we need an office supply store, you know? Just saying. But anyways, we're excited about the future of Scanlon. And everybody on the board wants to tell you, thanks for giving us a break during COVID. I mean, it was critical. We would not, there would be no one sitting if it wasn't for you guys being so generous during. True.
Other questions?
Do we need to agree now on the amount, or is that what comes on next week?
Next month.
Next month, okay.
Yes, you could just call a public hearing on the lease, allow public comment, and then make a decision in the motion as council.
Yeah, we need a motion to have a public hearing next month.
I move to have a public hearing for CN next month.
Second,
Second.
any further discussion? Call for the vote.
Can you let me know the date?
Yes.
Alex Bissett,
Yes.
Dan Gritsko,
Yes.
Meredith Hine,
Yes.
Bill Heisen, Eileen Morse,
Yeah.
Eddie Payne,
Yeah.
motion passes.
We on the 16th of September.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
We have to decide ordinance, I've heard, things over, I had a good discussion at work session, and we discussed it a couple times before, but I'll turn it over to Councilmember Morse. And, we just kind of, we'll see what we thoughts are right now.
So right now, at the last work session, we talked about the pros and cons of making E911 sign mandatory. At this point, I would just like direction from council on whether we should put more energy into the mandatory side of this or not.
I'm not a huge fan of the mandatory side of things, to be honest.
Let me, mention that after our meeting last week, Mr. Payne and I spoke a little bit, and Dan emailed later. First of all, our current ordinance covers most everything. But we feel like, I can't say we kind of feel on the same wavelength here that, mandatory is not a good option. Do it voluntarily and do it tastefully. If you do it voluntarily, it gives us a chance to, really enforce the ordinance that we have now. It's make them just like Alex's survey of buildings. If they don't see a readable number on that building from the street, that's a good place to start.
But who's gonna be in charge of enforcing it? Because I know we've had that before, it's not-
It's already on the books.
but we haven't done anything as far as
It's
the
like our administrator and zoning administrators.
It seems like it would be an easy priority. The council seems pretty straight if I come back. That we're continuing to enforce and, we're adhering to penalties.
Yeah, like I explained, I don't have any road frontage anywhere, and I'm landlocked. And I would have to get somebody else's permission to put a mandatory sign on their property saying how to get the house, but my house already has a number under a light on the driveway in. And several years ago, the county came through and made sure they had everybody in the computer. Remember leaving a sign, the number to the West Cottage next to my house, so that it would happen. So.
So can I ask, I'd like to just make a motion
Mhm.
to move mandatory forward and just call for a vote, so that we have it formally on the books. Is that okay?
Second.
How does the motion read?
So the motion is to continue work towards a mandatory E911 sign in town.
Directly encouraging voluntary adherence to keep the ordinance.
Well, I think it's one or the other. Yeah, let's just.
let's get
mandatory.
with
And I just want, again, it's just gonna give direction, no issues one way or the other.
No, we passed that, so I'm just gonna, we can speak to it now, so even though I'm seconding it, I'm against it. But the reason I'm against it is not for the intent. The intent, we as a town want safety, and I would say very much that I would, first of all, I applaud the efforts of the grant. I'm excited that we have the grant. I'm also excited that we have the signs. And I think the intent really should focus on an education to the town to help residents understand the value to have the signs, the value for rescue workers, the value for police, the value for renters. I think it's extremely important that we really do this. And I guess my perspective of wanting it to be voluntary is let's go after it from a voluntary level and see where we get and see how far we can go and really do talk about it as a town. Let's not force people to do it. But if we do that voluntary campaign, we can then kind of see where we end up. And then when we see where we end up, and I think your point, Council Hines, is a good one, is to say, where are numbers that should have already been there is, one of the things that often happens, I found, is a town councilor who champions a cause. That's why things happen. John Snoddy said that to me years ago. It takes somebody has to kind of fight for a cause. Zach used to be the one here fighting for straightening up the railroad all the time and the only thing bad about, one of the bad things about him not being here is he's not fighting for that, but that was his cause. So this is something that's really important. You brought our attention to this. And I think the fact that we haven't focused on it is because we haven't had somebody with your passion in your eyes. So we need that. That being said, I think it's a great effort and I think it's really good. I just would rather it be voluntary as we move forward with it.
And I feel incremental progress is still progress, right?
Absolutely.
Whether or not it's all the way that I would like, so, but I do want a formal program, that's all.
Sure.
So the grant does. Refresh my memory, and I apologize, because I know that we have spoken about this more than once.
No, that's
The
okay.
grant covers the cost of signs for every address within the, like, downtown limits.
So,
Well, the grant was originally submitted in terms of $8,000, which would have covered all the properties, because some properties already have.
Right.
And, they awarded us $5,000, correct about that. We had said if it's mandatory, we can scope it down to just the historic part of town. But now, if council does not want it to be mandatory, we would just be on a first come, first served basis until the funding runs out, right? So educate the community, get the word out, etc. What this won't do for us is get us consistency of placement, consistency of, not every property is going to have them. So the first responders may still struggle in some instances in properties in town and things like that, but, progress is
Didn't
progress.
the signs contingent upon having an ordinance?
Well, I think what's being proposed is that the current ordinance covers, I'm not
So we
convinced
still
that
get the
it
signs,
covers.
we still get the signs.
I'm
regardless.
not sure it covers E911 reflective
Oh, I
signs.
see.
I think it covers numbers on
Oh.
all of the buildings.
Okay.
And so that's where we get the discrepancy, right? So what's being proposed is that we at least start by marking all the properties first and making sure all properties have addresses. That doesn't mean they're going to have E911 markers that first responders can use to find the right apartment or whatever it is, right? So the application of the funding was for E911 reflective signs, not for house numbers.
Okay.
So
So
we
now
would
we have
be
to, now,
potentially misusing funds if we
Yeah.
say we're gonna use E911 just for house markers, so that's a
Where-
whole
where
different ball.
we used to, where if this passes, we will pay to have your E911.
That's correct.
If this doesn't pass and we start enforcing the other ordinance, it's on the resident or the property owner now, financially, to
right.
make sure that their house is.
And we can educate, and as we say, you don't have a house number and you also don't have an E911 number. We're providing funding for E911 reflective signs. Would you like to sign up for that? And put that on your house as well as a house number.
Javier, you might be the best person to ask this question to. Would the E911 marker count as fulfillment of the ordinance that's already set, saying that you have to have a visible house number?
The language is that you need to have an identified street address.
Okay, so if I had, I do not. I'm a renter, my house does not have the number visible on it. If I had an E911 marker with my house number on it, would that then fulfill not only having the E911, but would that cover like, I'm now compliant in that ordinance of having a,
From the
having-
language I see, 401 needs to have lettering, 3 numbers, not lettering, 3 numbers, 401. You had a sign that stated 401, you'd have your street address on the front.
So you're saying
Just the
that
old
if you got an E911, it would satisfy both?
Yes.
The existing ordinance plus the desire to have E911.
I'll always check with Jim, but it's pretty much the language that I shared now.
I think
It's
it
just,
would.
language just says you need clearly numbered and. More than those little letters that you nail in, any 911's clearer than that.
Depending on where it's put.
Yes, and then one point I wanted to say is the fire department was pretty adamant that they thought that uniformity of placement of these signs was of most value to them. They were much more reasonable when I talked to them in on one-to-one about mandatory versus voluntary, but what they were concerned, and it seems very practical when you put it this way. If you're showing up, you want to be able to look at the same side one way or another. If you look at the same side and it isn't there, you at least know it isn't there. It's even more complicated if you're looking to left, to the right, up or down.
Well, and also if you live in the underlying driveway, there's different specifications in the ordinance that I drafted that had different property types that would place the marker at the appropriate place for the type
Well,
of property.
My questioning of it was just that it, the ordinance we have in place right now financially does fall on the property owner. So I was thinking if this didn't pass, it might at least, if we start forcing the ordinance that we have, that might encourage, like, hey, you can either pay to get these letters or here's
The town will.
free
pay to put up
911 sign for you to put up.
And then we would have to decide, and not right now, but at the next council meeting, I'm assuming, if we want to stick with the blue or we want to go with ARB recommended green, because then we'll have a mixture of blue and green signs.
I think
not
not
only
only
do you have-
that are up currently, the folks who have signs are blue.
Yes, right. So you'll have inconsistency in color and inconsistency in placement. I'm not advocating, whether that's acceptable or not. I'm not a first responder, I can guess, but.
One thing I would say going back to it is, I know we'll do this, but just so it's said, there'll be a sheet or something that says, if it's voluntary, we recommend it goes here, we recommend, in other words, we would want to have a sheet that says.
Well, as part of the education campaign, right, you would hand out the sign and then give them the placement guidelines.
Right.
Right, but that doesn't guarantee that they'll follow.
Oh,
the
sure, but it's helpful to know, what people recommended them to what to do.
And it won't address like the historic properties, the difference between a historic property and outside the bounds of the historic district.
Well, if you wanted to go for uniformity and, blue is opposed to green.
Yeah.
You could always, I think use the grant money just to substitute, take the old blue ones down and put the other ones up if you want more uniformity. That's just one thought I had. But I'm really against it being mandatory. I'm against any type of fines. But we haven't really identified problem properties yet, have we?
It's gotta be the first step, I think.
Yeah, I mean, we might be putting the cart before the horse, even though there's a need for, the first responders, to get to their addresses, to get to their purpose. If we identify the problem areas first, I think everything else will fall into place behind it.
There were also a couple of us that might have been hanging by. We talked about adding to the current ordinance that after January 1st, 2025, new neighborhoods would be mandatory.
But then you fall, if a new neighborhood ends up being an HOA, what do you do there? That have to be worked out, I guess, but.
I think government outweighs HOA.
Not all the time. Not all the time.
Imagine if the government said, this is the law, and the HOA could say, not in our job.
I lived in the HOA down in Georgia, and your mailbox is federal property once you put it up. I woke up one morning and the HOA changed their mailbox. So, I mean, I guess that was a federal offense.
That was a federal offense. I mean, just because the HOA did it, didn't make it legal.
So, you know, you have a.
Something from, yeah, cops.
If we wanna talk about.
Yeah, we should do that, we should, we have a motion now, right now.
And then vote.
Let's, read the motion back one more time.
The motion was to continue work, towards a mandatory sign.
A mandatory B911 signs, moving that forward, yes or no?
Has it been seconded?
Yes,
Second.
yeah, seconded,
Now, we're finished with discussion on it?
yes.
Okay, let's call for the vote.
Alex Bassett,
No.
Dan Gritsko,
No.
Meredith Hines,
Yes.
Bill Heisen.
No.
Eileen Morris.
Yes.
Eddie Payne,
No.
Motion failed,
4-2.
Okay, so at this point then, Javier, we should speak about how to do this because
Mhm.
we didn't provision to have volunteers, man on this. Do whatnot, we can probably take some of the text out of the ordinance to give guidance to people who fund it, but then we're gonna have to put out information flyers to the town residents to say, hey, if you wanna
Um,
E911 marker, or how we're gonna get the inventory, I don't know what that
Now,
process.
how long do we have the, money available? Indefinitely, or is there a time limit on when we have to spend it by?
Believe we have to report back November, so one thing I could do is reach out to the grant administrator and explain the situation. I usually find that grantors are almost as much interested in the success of the project as the grantee. Put it that way. From action items, I think it would be just a review of the ordinance here and see what's applicable to what I'm hearing as an education campaign, so placement guidelines, so maybe a one page that's readable, comprehensible. And then after touching base, well, reviewing what we had on the draft we had here and touching base with the grantor, maybe sharing a little bit of information with council about what staff could do with getting these E911 signs out, and then
May I make a suggestion on that? I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I think something like this is important enough that it needs to go beyond hanging a flyer up on a bulletin board and posting it on the.
Absolutely.
I think what it's gonna require, or what I propose anyway, is a ballot.
I'll tell you what, when the planning commission was kicking around the southwest small area plan, we developed a thoughtful brochure. It was a brochure, and we hand delivered it to everybody in the area.
That's the way to do it.
We knocked on the door, we said, this is about what we're talking about, and if they weren't there, we left the flyer, if we were there, with the person that handed it.
And this would also be, I would call it a campaign meeting. So being an advocate for that, we want to volunteer, I'm volunteering to also help get the message out, but we would want to talk to some of the media sources around here, make sure they are aware. We would also want to make sure that we use any known resources that we have and invite the public to come, probably a contact in terms of, we recommend by, I don't know, October 1st or something, some date that says, please let us know that you want to do it by this date. We also recommend that those that have little children or people who have difficulty with mobility or their senior citizens, we want to prioritize, we want everybody to be safe, but please take advantage of this. It's a great thing to have. Let's do this, let's support it as a town, that's all.
Yeah, I think you can roll this out in several phases too. I think you can just open it up to the public and say if you want one, come get one.
Yeah,
You can see how successful that is, and then add a little bit more pressure and more pressure. And as you're doing that, be in touch with the grantor and see what they say, and if they're really strict about the
So
time.
flyers
push a little harder.
are developed and then.
I like that.
Table and farmers market, so.
Yeah, I'm not a door knocker,
Yeah. You can get people-
I'm a door knocker.
all right, thank
Why
you.
don't your committee, work on developing a rough draft of a flyer or something like that?
I do think we need to revisit the ordinance and make sure it's what we want, ordinance.
Well, then, let's not do that, let's just look at the information flyer, the only thing I'm gonna do is cut and paste from the ordinance, because I'm not going to. Maybe put a lot of hours in this already, so I don't really wanna go much farther, but I will cut and paste from the existing ordinance
Yeah.
and create a one page.
Well, I'm saying you need to do it, but I think the town council needs to get that.
Yeah,
see if
yeah,
that-
yeah, I'll bring it back to the
If
council,
it's, you know, we're
Yeah.
missing anything with that.
sure. And then you all have to decide green or blue or which one you do. And style.
And as we get on to this next bullet here, can we kind of kick around the idea of an SOP as far as interns and compensation and stuff like that?
Mhm.
Because I mean, it was a lot of time.
All right. Item number D, Mr. Town Administrator.
Yeah, so not much from last week. I believe this language is almost verbatim copied from last week. But I just wanted to share with town council. We had completed a internship for a 8-week internship for a local resident. He was more than agreeable, appreciative, even left a letter. I thought it was a very productive and informative 8 weeks and very helpful to staff, and we were very appreciative. It helped us address other priorities we had, be it business or personal. So from last week, I just wanted to share that as an opportunity just to show some appreciation. Naturally, I'll keep following up with him and be a professional resource for him because that's almost the most valuable things out of these experiences for undergrads.
Can we do one thing? I know we've done this sometimes before. First of all, I think it'd be nice to, maybe we should do this for other volunteers, maybe a letter of appreciation from the council would be a simple thing to do. I think a letter of thank you that dates, you know, we note your service, voluntary service to the town. And maybe use that as a way to also,
We've done on certificates before too. so-
yeah, just something like that, just something like that.
Present it to them, make them come to a meeting and present it.
I've been saying this since then, but I like the idea of like an honorarium, but I think it ought to come from us rather than town office. I mean, I'll chip in. Maybe you guys can just kind of doing your job, and so maybe you know, that kind of thing, you just give them a gift certificate or something like that, because I don't think you should start a precedent of doing this for volunteers, because there's so many volunteers we're missing, you know. I mean, kind of that haven't got anything. So anyway, I think we ought to really think about this before we start this notion, unless we come up with a policy that's going to be fair.
Well, I think one differentiating potentially is with a young person in college, not like an employed
Yeah.
person. Who's working and dedicated. You know, I'm
Yeah.
kind of big on helping young people, incentivizing young people to volunteer and to be civic minded, so
$25 and take care of it. I'll do that.
I would too, but I think the town. Thanks.
I've taken the position that when we have interns, they come from colleges and universities, the colleges and universities should pay us as part of their education.
Yeah, but that
And
doesn't-
volunteerism is a good education too. So just the fact that someone's volunteering, knowing that they're not gonna be compensated is great. And then it doesn't hurt so much when they are. So.
You give a reference too.
And people like we give a reference, give us a certificate. But I don't think we should, you know, pay volunteers.
Well, can we make a motion or something on this?
Can I ask one question real quick?
Mhm.
Is this the norm? In
Oh,
government offices, in,
oh, absolutely.
Well, they typically pay for
Well,
many.
they started paying for interns a little bit around COVID because nobody would take anyone because they were remote work. But the norm has become, I'm probably the last ones who was doing unpaid internships it's shifted towards even something, very minuscule towards paid internships. It's just become kind of an industry standard, but
So the industry standard is to give like a
Yeah,
couple $100.
well, no, the industry standards actually pay out, and at least when I talked to the administrator of the intern program at PVCC a few years back,
Mhm.
they said that you could have an intern, but they insisted that the intern be paid minimum wage.
I'd like to make a motion, so number one, that we do the letter, number two, we do an honorarium of $200.
I second,
With an honorary something from the town fund.
from the town.
You can chip that and you can make it less from the town.
That'd
That'd be great, that's
I'll
great,
do that.
that's wonderful.
Because I've had a hard time, having town money go to that, or,
No,
I
I,
already got requested, like,
I appreciate that's, we appreciate that.
Any further discussion?
well, I think in the future, if we do it on a road or any kind of thing like this, it should be done, upfront, not in retrospect.
And that's a good point, that's.
That's what I
I
want.
think it's a standard operating
Yeah.
procedure.
So when I said what we,
I'm gonna be an intern.
what is an appropriate gift, what is an appropriate compensation?
And that goes with that,
And who's eligible?
volunteer, form, we're gonna try to work on it, so if you work, this is, you're working as volunteer, no harm, and also, no funding. No pay, no compensation, I work with volunteers, many, and it's tough to honor them. But I've never, been with an organization that pays volunteers, they might give them a gift certificate, and they might give them, a T-shirt or something like that, but not,
And
money.
Well, I think
internship
that's
and a
one-
volunteer, two different things.
When you have a standard operating procedure, it doesn't necessarily have to be a code or what we have to do, but it is what is expected. So when we take an intern in, we're like, all right, they've done for the 8 weeks. As the town, we're gonna expect, we're gonna give them this much, or not that much, X, Y, and Z, but let's have it written down somewhere, so we're not every time somebody volunteers or is an intern here, we have the same
we could amend,
discussion.
we could amend our HR policy. That's right where you would slip it.
Okay.
Yes. I think that's a good idea.
Any other discussion? Motion's been made and seconded and discussed. Read the motion back.
A motion for a certificate and a $200 honorarium. From town funds.
Clerk, call the roll, please.
Alex Bassett,
Yes.
Dan Gritsko,
Yes.
Mary Hines,
Yes,
Bill Heisen, Eileen Morris,
Yes.
Edward Payne,
Nope.
motion passes 42.
Move on to the Bowers donation.
So, Parks and Rec, minutes, well, just to update from last week, we discussed a little bit about, what is it? We left last week's discussion with a recommendation, at least from staff, to consider a reappropriation at the 6-month mark when we discussed it previously. Being a little bit more hands-on and a little bit earlier, talking about what the end of the year would look like, and then that kind of setting us up for our next fiscal year. Short and sweet, Bill and I have material from the advocate for the donor on what could be prioritized for beautification. And then the Parks and Rec minutes that were shared with council today capture a good chunk of that. It's not all of it, but it was mostly discussed there. What I might suggest, again, for efficiency, especially in regards to cost or for consistency and for clarity, maybe looking at a 6-month mark, getting a state of the half year, and then including this in a consideration. Essentially, something else could come up, and we'd want to kind of all talk about it together at the same time. In the meantime, we do have a small portion of capital work, and I could prioritize beautification projects. Some of it, I think, is just communication with staff about expectations or things that were kind of lost in the churn about maintenance. Some of it will cost, yeah. So I just wanted to kind of share that with you guys. I put it as discussion on the agenda.
I just, and all I would say, just for the fact that something, Barbara said, and also, and Fergus said is, I mean, in the end, we just want to do
Right.
in the spirit of what the donor wanted. I mean, we just, I would say that's whatever, I would just want to make sure, however we can, I don't know the right answer, but whatever that is. That, the other thing we would want to make sure, just like a pattern in the future, we should make sure when somebody does give us money, it's either with no strings attached. Or if there are strings, we know what they are, just because we don't want somebody who gives money to be, felt like it was misused or anything.
We're still with us.
Yes.
I don't know, because I asked anybody else that wanted to be sure.
Yes.
He just said Canal Basin.
The letters paragraph's kind of. Yeah, and it says for Canal Basin, so.
But it was for more for beautification, not repair. It's not like fixing a rope that was more
And then
maintained.
spoken with Bill, and to the point, it's difficult for clarity on that.
Yeah, it's a tough
So
one.
maybe just even received expectations at the beginning would make it much more clear.
Yeah, but in the future, I think we do need it.
And then also, there's the whole Ivy thing, he wants Ivy going up the back of the building, which I'm strongly against, that absolutely.
That's a
Huh?
challenge.
Very specific thing.
Yeah, I mean, that will destroy. Like.
Yeah,
I would prioritize the sign, the hog wallers, the boats, especially the one on the back, because we worked on the front one.
Yeah,
But we have the list, so the only thing I can think of is that Jam already has direction to communicate with them, and then Bill and me have discussed a whole bunch, so we can just powwow or reconvene again.
yeah, we
So
should take it to the February meeting, we send time.
So the question for tonight is just, do we reappropriate the leftover funds from this donation? What was left over from last year to this year? Is that what we're discussing tonight?
If it were me, I would I would, in a public meeting, get clear direction to prioritize beautification from council. I just don't want to end up having to do two reappropriations at our size. So I would rather do it if we have to do anything later in the year and get that all kind of squared up, because we do have capital money right to even just, for me to just work with.
I'm unclear how the arms are.
It's not that we don't have an appropriated amount to work on Canal Basin Square
Out of town, but.
out of town budget,
Okay,
because
that's a line.
we have a line item right
Gotcha.
now. But I want to also balance that with what I'm concerned is, it's something I want to prove is, I want to get to a point where people feel really comfortable donating a lot of money to us,
Yeah.
as somebody who worked in nonprofit spaces.
Right.
And this feels like an effort to move towards that.
Sure, but there's also the counterbalance of, too much.
Yeah.
Influence, right, over
So I think I would just,
Ivy on buildings or
Yeah.
something.
So I'm still confused.
Hmm.
Are you saying that we spend our own money before we spend, because I'm gonna be honest with you, my visions for what I wanna see done to Canal Basin Square this year
it's more than the fun.
is gonna be a lot more than what we budgeted, as far as redoing all of those water damage signs and, all of that stripping. We have the new plexiglass, but it still needs, the case still needs to be stripped and finished and, if that money has been donated for the beautification of
Mhm.
Canal Basin Square, we can easily use that money towards the beautification of Canal Basin Square. I don't want a donation to go unused. So I'm just confused about. You're saying
So it's,
you recommend the town council consider this year a reappropriation, That would include the carry, so that's what we're saying, we wanna carry over the unspent donation from last year.
For beautification.
For beautification of town council this, or beautification of town council, you're gonna make over beautification of Canal Basin Square this year.
So there's like the accounting and the budgetary, which it will be required at some point. But then there's also the policy question. So it's like, what do you want me to prioritize? And I wanna,
I think.
for me, I feel very strong about the accounting part, because I think it will do right, and it getting lost from last year, I think it's just a bad, I'll put it this way, it's a bad move.
I think if we prioritize funds,
Oh, sorry.
if we prioritize the two buckets as you've outlined, right, the line item in the budget for maintenance tasks.
Yeah.
And then the other donations for beautifications, right, to be determined with the donors through council at some point in time. Then we may be able to get some good work done on Canal Basin, right? Is that an adequate sort of way to look at it?
Yes.
Is that what you're asking for, is direction on the spend here?
Yeah, like I would start spending on beautification the first 6 months out of what I have for quote unquote capital improvements. And then I would recommend maybe 6 months in, we do a reappropriation, catch anything we need to. And then carry over also this 3,000, and then the next six, or the 2,500 in the next 6 months, but. Yes. Or we could do it right now, especially because we have a public hearing.
I guess weather permitting too, what you wanna do.
Yes.
I
So
mean,
we could do some fall work.
if we reappropriate it now or in 6 months, it's still in this budget, right? So we can have a public hearing to reappropriate the funds, and if we spend them in 6 months,
Yes.
that's still okay, right? We won't have to have a public meeting again.
It's okay until next July.
Yeah, and then one advantage is we are gonna have a public hearing next month, so we could fold that in.
I
So
say we roll it in.
in the back of my head, I'm always thinking about the couple hundred. Or it could even be more, depending. So we could call a public hearing and reappropriate that.
Oh, the couple hundred to advertise for a public hearing, okay.
I'm always pinching
I'm
numbers.
so confused, I understand.
So that's
Well,
why,
having a public hearing on the scan thing.
Yeah,
And
if
we
we're calling
it
a public
out.
hearing anyway,
that'd be the way to go.
yeah, I say we do it next month.
Because really, it's like. Oh, you could definitely do it tonight if that was the question, Councilman.
Yeah, I do have to vote for public hearing tonight.
You
We're
could
gonna
just
have
make a
that tomorrow.
motion, yeah. And then we would publicly advertise it twice in 2 weeks, because it'd be a budget change. Anything more than 3%, we have to have a public hearing on. But for a budget, our small, almost anything ends up being more than 3%. Yeah,
Well, I move that we have a public hearing next month regarding the reappropriation of the Bowers donation
yeah,
for Canal Basin Square improvements.
Second.
Any further discussion?
Could we proceed for this funding or for additional money for Sanders? Is he getting $5,000? I'm not sure.
You would be-
This or we're appropriating the amount we have
you would do a reappropriation.
for.
That is the same amount that was unspent last
Oh, okay.
year. So we have that, it ends up being about 2,500.
You're saying, we just need to clean the book, so to speak. The money was there, we wanna have it there where it should be noted.
And then
This is the money that.
Just carry it over.
Yeah, and then I brought it up to council, so it's on public record, and then you guys can hold me accountable on it. So that was the other aspect. That's the
It's just
policy.
protecting the money that we donate.
I know this isn't normal, but we have someone in the audience with their hand up. Do we wanna acknowledge it, allow them?
Is it about this issue?
Yeah, just because both in Parks and Rec and Government Services, this has been a subject that's been brought up multiple times, mostly by George Goodwin. And the main, has nothing to do with what you're talking about totally now in the beginning. The main thing is that the gentleman who donated the money would like to know if it's spent in the right way.
Mhm.
And every time we do something completed, we could send him, say, $200 was just spent on this, and $1,000 was just spent on this. Because he's looking at giving us another $5,000, but he's recanted on that, because he felt we gave him $5,000 and haven't done it with it. So you're talking about one thing, and I raised my hand at the beginning before we got to that point. But I think it's a simple way, that's why grants are broken out. You can have line items under that $5,000 to show the spent. And every time something's spent, it's good to reach out to them and say, just to let you know, we did whatever, just to let you know, we did whatever. I think some of all the asks have come because when you made the donation, he didn't get an acknowledgement that the donation was received. When he made the donation, he didn't feel that it was being spent properly. So now he feels like he has to tell us what to do. Originally it was just here, $5,000, make it look better. And now he wanted to give us another $5,000, but he's holding back. So that's all I wanted to point out. There's nothing to do with what you guys are doing. We're talking about how to,
Tangentially.
yeah, but I think that's more what they were talking about, and that's been brought up over and over.
And I think that's good, if we're talking about standard operating procedures, when we do get money, we should send a thank you, and we should give them an accounting of how the funds were spent.
He wants to get more, but.
I'm the last to know that, but.
Okay, we have motion made, second, and discuss, and also the.
Alex Bassett,
Yes.
Dan Gritsko,
Yeah.
Meredith Hines,
Yes.
Bill Heisen, Eileen Morris,
Yeah.
Edward Payne.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
So we'll call a public hearing.
Anything else before we adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Get out.
Meredith, there's a box for you up front too, that